Welcome back to the Cage Rage podcast. This is Devin. This is a CRP News Roundup. It is Monday, September the 9th, 2019. If you have not subscribed to the CRP on YouTube and Facebook, please go and do so. Hit the like button on Facebook to our Facebook page. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube. And stay tuned for updates. We are covering everything from, obviously, mixed martial arts, but boxing and pro wrestling and outside the cage issues. We do predictions. We do odds reviews. We do recaps. We cover all the top stories. So stay tuned. I enjoy what we're doing. And hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button to support us. We have a lot to talk about today. Big weekend in the world of mixed martial arts over the past weekend with two big events. UFC 242 that took place in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and also Bellator 226. And there's no place. There was also big other news that we're going to get to, big announcement regarding the Madison Square Garden card for the UFC in November, UFC 244, that I'll get into, that you probably heard about. A lot of people are excited about. But we got to start with none other than Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov, who increased his stellar, really unmatched resume to now 28-0. 28 wins in 28 fights. And it was just more of the same. It was really upsetting. I mean, I'm a fan of Khabib. I think that he's a very humble man. I think he proved that in the post-fight interview inside the octagon, that the Conor McGregor altercation did not define him. That's why it was so ridiculous that they actually tried to make him do an anti-bullying campaign after all that, and he basically just told them to F off, that he was not going to do that. Looked at it as moral hypocrisy that they would even ask him to do that. But he handled this victory with class. He threw a lot of credit and respect toward Dustin, and I was really pulling for Dustin in this because I thought he was just the archetype of the perfect underdog coming into this bout. But it turned out to be more of the same, just another Khabib fight. Dustin Poirier came out. Dustin Poirier, really good boxing. Khabib never gave him a chance to really open up with that. He stayed back in the kick range really well. Forced Dustin to really not want to overcommit with his hands and take the risk of getting taken down. So he had to kind of stay back with what range that Khabib was playing in. And it forced him to really have to open up with kicks. And Dustin's not really a kicker. And he seemed to really struggle getting planted to really open up with any shots. Khabib latched a hold of him early, took him down, was getting his back real quick, mounted him in the first round. I mean, just ragdolled him the whole first round. Dustin stayed strong, stayed composed, was even in a couple rear naked choke situations early, and stayed very relaxed, very calm, was looking at his corner for instructions, seemed to be handling the adversity pretty as well as he could, and seemed to have his head on straight in between the rounds. And while he was sitting on his corner, he was analyzing what was going on in the fight. You could tell that he was relaxed. He understood what he was going to have to face some adversity. But with all that said, it's just not enough. I mean, he did end up cracking Khabib one good time in the second round. Khabib ended up latching back onto him, shot a really nice double leg, ended up putting him back down on the ground. Dustin did tighten in a head arm and guillotine in the third round. That at that point, I mean, Khabib really doesn't have much of a neck, and he's a fantastic grappler, and it was very unlikely he would submit him in the first round with something like that, let alone tired and after being ragdolled in the third round. And Khabib ended up just getting out of it, past his guard, took his back again, and this time he just locked in the choke, the rear naked choke, and finished it. It was really just a complete masterclass. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. He said he just said beforehand, it's not going to be anything special. I'm going to go in, I'm going to work him, I'm going to make him tired, I'm going to pressure him, and I'm going to take him down, I'm going to tap him out. That's going to be the fight. That's exactly what happened. And Khabib now 28-0, as I said. I would say is obviously the most dominant lightweight fighter we've ever seen. And he's come out and said that he believes he needs more respect. He believes he's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And that's the first thing I'll start with about where we go from here. Is he the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world? I have been saying for years, you know, I know that there's a lot of personal outside the cage issues regarding Jon Jones, but Jon Jones I've still said is the best fighter that I've seen in the cage. Best fighter in the world, just in terms of dominance and pure skill level. I think Khabib takes the spot now. I mean, he's walking through right now the best division in the sport, arguably, with that in welterweight. And he's got such a stellar record, just like Jones. I think it's a toss-up between him and Jon right now. I would have no problem with Khabib being ranked #1. But the more deeper and question going forward from here that to me, it's an obvious answer, but with Dana and the UFC and their love affair with Conor McGregor, it still makes me nervous. Ariel Helwani did right, which I'm very thankful he did, came right out after this fight, and on his Twitter, he posts an image of all four of the stare downs from the first 4 times that Tony and Khabib were matched up, and said it's time, indicating that we need to see that everything's lined up now. There's no excuse why it can't happen. Khabib Nurmagomedov needs to be matched up with Tony Ferguson for the 5th time, but it needs to finally happen. In my opinion, this is the most necessary and important fight in modern MMA history. These two guys have a combined UFC record of 27 wins and 1 decision. The 1 decision was Tony Ferguson's loss to Michael Johnson in his 4th UFC fight. Close decision loss. Since then, he's come back and won 12 straight fights. They've cleaned out what many consider for years to be the most talent-rich division in the sport. They've been matched up 4 times, and for varying reasons, it's fallen through 4 different times. And every single time it's fallen through, it's just gotten better. It's just the prolonged wait for this fight to happen has just gotten better. And I think they're both in their absolute best prime right now, with the most experience they've ever had right now, on the best runs they've ever had right now. This is the time to make that fight. And I don't think there's a fight in history that I'll be more excited, that I've been more excited about, than the potential of actually seeing the cage door lock and knowing that those two are about to fight each other. That is the ultimate fight of this generation. I mean, it really is the fight that could define who the best of this division is, of this era is. When you really look at the resume, Tony Ferguson is 15-1 in the UFC. He's finishing most of these guys. Khabib Nurmagomedov is 12-0 in the UFC, 28-0 overall. He's undefeated, dominant fighter. And Tony is the way they clash with their styles, their personalities, those are the two guys nobody wants to fight. Those two know how great of a fight that is. I hope that the casual MMA fan understands how great of a fight that is. But Dana has come out and said that Tony is next. But if not, if he turns it down, according to what he said, and that's indicating that about how Tony turned down the interim title fight earlier this year with Max Holloway, and they ended up giving it to Dustin Poirier, and that's how we got this whole scenario with Dustin Poirier fighting Khabib. I don't think Tony's going to turn this down. I think that was a ridiculous statement at this point, because he just called out this past week he wants the winner in December. So he wants to fight Khabib in December. That's his goal. Negotiations are always going to be had, and we're going to see where that goes. But I think that is a great time frame. I think that they're probably going to prolong it a little bit. I think we're probably looking at Super Bowl weekend into January. I think we might be looking at a Khabib Tony massive fight. I don't know if they're going to do that right after Christmas. I think there's just too much money to be made in that fight. I think it's too big of a fight, too great of a fight. I think they're going to let that stew a little bit, and I think they have time to do that. I think Conor McGregor is going to come back at the end of the year or early next year as well, but I think that he's probably going to fight the winner of Cerrone and Gaethje. I think that's what makes the most sense. But I just, Dustin Poirier from here, I love Dustin Poirier. I love what he's doing in terms of charity, and so does Khabib apparently. Said he was going to donate. He's going to sell his shirt and stuff, and he's going to donate the proceeds to Dustin's charity, which I thought was a great, honorable thing. Max Holloway did the same thing after their fight. Said that he was donating his gloves to be sold and giving the proceeds to Dustin's charity. And Dustin's doing great work. He's a great man, and I think he'll come back from this. I think this was his moment, and he fell short a little bit. I'm not sure he's ever going to be a world champion, but he's a great fighter. He's one of the best fighters in the world, so great job for him. And Khabib just continues to add up to his. I mean, he's definitely in the elite of all time. He's in there with Jones and GSP and Anderson and Fedor, Mighty Mouse, DC, Khabib. Those are like the handful of the absolute greatest that we've ever seen. And I think Khabib beating Tony, I mean, he's really got a strong argument as dominant, if not the most dominant fighter we've ever seen. So, Khabib just continues to pull this off, but the prospects of a Khabib-Tony fight should get every MMA fan super excited. I mean, that's the greatest fight of our generation. I really, truly believe that. That and the Jones-DC bouts. Those two right there, those are the super fights. Those are the massive super fights of our generation. It's not Conor and Khabib. As great as that was, Tony's even a step ahead of that. Tony and Khabib's even better than Conor and Khabib. So hopefully that happens next. On other news in the UFC 242 recap, we had Paul Felder rematching Edson Barboza. Their first fight took place in 2015. Barboza got the nod in the decision there. This time the decision goes to Paul Felder by split decision. One judge had it 30-27 for Barboza, and then two judges had it 29-27 for Felder. I don't see how anybody scored this fight 30-27 for either fighter, but I thought the right score was 29-28, 2 rounds to 1 for Paul Felder. I had the first round. I thought Barboza was just a little sharper, landed the harder shots, was landing some really quick, one-strike combinations. I thought that Paul Felder, the second round was the hardest one to score, for sure. Barboza got the takedown, but he ended up getting his head cut open with a lot of elbows from Felder's back. Felder really made him pay for taking him down, and that was, that's kind of about how do you score these scenarios where one guy gets a takedown, but then it actually backfires. How do you score that? Or sometimes we see a lot of submission attempts from that position. Do we just really elevate the takedown above all the submission attempts or all the elbows that he ate taking him down? So I scored the second round for Felder. I thought that his pressure was his pressure and the damage that he inflicted from his back stole that round. And then the third round, I thought that he just walked Barboza down the whole fight. Barboza didn't really land too much in that third round. I thought neither really did Felder, but I thought he landed better, more punches, better shots, and really controlled the center, walked him down. So it was a very close fight, just like the first, but I would have had this fight for Felder. Felder came out, I believe, ranked number 10. And Barboza came in, I believe, ranked number 6 or 7. So this is going to be a big move forward for Paul Felder. It's interesting to see where he goes from here. I think possibly he fights my next person I want to highlight from this card, Islam Machachev. Khabib's teammate, very similar. I've been saying he's very similar to Khabib. He's a mauler just as well. Great grappling. Came into this fight with a 17-1 MMA record, and I believe he was 6-1 in the UFC. He's now 7-1 in the UFC. He's 3 years younger than Khabib, and he's now on a 6-fight winning streak. And he looks better every single time I see. I think this guy could be a world champion. I really believe that. I mean, his striking has come a long way. People forget that he's primarily a grappler. Very good grappler, but he's knocked people out. He knocked out Gleason Tebow, and he's resilient. He's tough. his lone loss on his UFC record, on his entire MMA record, was he got knocked out by Adriano Martins back at UFC 192, and then in the first round, you know, he's gotten clipped. But man, he's definitely come back better, and he's got a great resume going right now. He came in ranked number 15. I think that he could fight I think he could fight Paul Felder, Edson Barboza. I would actually call him in both those fights. I might even call him against somebody like Justin Gaethje. I definitely would call him against Donald Cerrone. I think Machachev could be a top 5 contender in this division at 155 pounds. His teammate, and I'm sure a former role model in Khabib, is at the helm of this division right now. But Khabib's actually signaled retirement in the future. And Islam's young still. Islam, when he's 30, he's going to be good. Very good. He's going to keep getting better. He trains over there at AKA with Khabib and DC and all them. And he has a lot of people that he's under. So keep in mind. And he fought a really good guy in this fight and dropped him in about, I thought he had him out of there in the third, I believe in the beginning of the third round, dropped him with a knee. Really came close to finishing. Davey Ramos really stayed tough and hung in there to go to the decision, but this was all Islam Makhachev's fight, and he was so slick with his striking. Good head movement, good range, had a good jab. He just looked really good in this fight. So, and his striking has come such a long way. So, stay tuned for Islam Makhachev in the future. Moving on from here, Curtis Blades defeats Shamil Abdurakhimov. Second round, ground and pound, TKO. This was a total mismatch. Curtis Blades, top 5 heavyweight. As I mentioned in the pre-fight, he's been completely flawless in what we've seen of him, other than his 2 knockout losses to Francis Ngannou. Other than that, he's walking through guys, and this was just a total mismatch against the top 10 heavyweight. I mean, there's such a tier at the top of the heavyweight division. The top guys are so far ahead of everybody else. So good performance by Curtis Blades, and he just continues to. I don't know who's next for him. I don't have a name right off the top of my head. Maybe Junior Dos Santos. If Junior wants to keep fighting, he's already knocked out Alistair Overeem. So I don't know. We'll see. Also Diego Ferrara, who he beat Marabek Taisumov, who's a very good fighter also. But Diego Ferrara, a lot of people are sleeping on him. 34 years old, 16-2 overall. He now has, I believe, a 7-2 UFC record, and he's on a 5-fight winning streak inside the UFC. So, looking very good and kind of flying under the radar. But he wins a unanimous decision here to open up the main card. Also, Joanne Calderwood, I highlighted this in my pre-fight. This was a top 10 rank. These are 2 top 10 ranked women's flyweights. Joanne Calderwood picked up a much-needed win by defeating Andrea Lee by split decision. This was a very close fight. Could have gone either way. I had it for Calderwood, actually. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but she's going to keep her spot in the rankings. But every time I look at this division, neither one of these girls stood out to me as somebody that can beat Valentina. So they're ranked girls, but this is still a division that's really needing some new talent that's going to come in and ascend to real contendership as somebody that people are going to really be excited to see fight Valentina. Because right now, when it comes to Valentina, I really think the only thing that anybody's even excited about would be a potential move for her back up to 35 to fight somebody like Amanda Nunes for the 3rd time. Or I would say the newest contender that hasn't fought her that's at that division or lower, I'm interested in is maybe Weili Zhang. Looks so good against Jessica Andrade, and she's now at the top of the helmet strawweight. She might be able to move up and fight, and that would be interesting. I think could sell. But I didn't see out of Calderwood or Lee somebody that could fight Valentina. But UFC 242 was overall a very good event, and it was definitely the story of the night was obviously Khabib Nurmagomedov just returning just to prove how just completely dominant he is. Moving on from here, Bellator 226 also took place over the weekend, and the main event, ended anticlimactically to say the least. No contest, 3:51 of the first round, accidental eye poke by Ryan Bader. I don't believe they'll run this back. I don't think anybody cares. It was so clearly obvious where this fight was going. I don't think anybody that watched this fight or meditated on this fight going into the fight thought it would go any different than it was going, or it would have been any different had it kept going. I mean, obviously, I don't want to discredit a professional fighter like Chet Kongo, who's a very good fighter, who's been around a long time. He could have pulled a miracle out of his whatever, but, you know, I doubt it. It looked like he was just completely outmatched in the wrestling department like we expected. I think Ryan Bader doesn't really have any competition right now in Bellator. And I don't want to be dismissive. I don't like being one of those guys, but I'm just kind of bored with it. I want to see a real contender come in. Chet Kongo just beat Vitaly Minakov. I was hoping Minakov would be that guy, would beat Kongo, and then we'd have an undefeated former champ fighting Ryan Bader. But I don't see it right now. I don't see anybody in Bellator right now even matching Bader. Those higher weight classes in both the UFC and Bellator are pretty weak, and the elite guys, I mean, it's even worse in Bellator. The elite guy is just so far ahead of the rest of the divisions that there's nothing there. But what I said in my pre-fight that I was most excited about with this card, that, you know, turned out to be what really did turn out to be interesting, was it was the start of the 16-man featherweight Grand Prix that Bellator is having, where they have their 16 top guys that they chose from the featherweight division fighting in this Grand Prix, a throwback to the Pride days of the Pride FC Grand Prix. And the first 4 bouts of this, the first 8 fighters took to the cage. And it turned out that Derek Campos defeated Daniel Straus, former Bellator featherweight champion, and just completely dominated him. I mean, 30-26, 30-25, 30-25. I mean, this was a just completely lopsided fight of a domination of a former title contender, former champion of this division. Derek Campos is somebody to watch. And then Adam Borix, who just came off a big knockout over, well, his name's slipping me. He was the hyped phenom that they brought into Bellator, the young kid who they just are pushing way too fast. He got the big knockout over him. He goes in and knocks out Pat Curren in this fight. Looked just even more impressive, and he's a young, talented kid. Pedro Carvalho goes in and beats Sam Cecilio. Pedro Carvalho is a new, fresh contender, and we saw the same thing we've seen from Sam Cecilio for years. Good everywhere, really. I mean, heavy strikes, all that, but if he doesn't get you out of there, I mean, he does kind of fade and gets a little tired, and he can get worked. And Carvalho looked super chill in the fire and picked his shots well. Ended up getting him out of there with a submission in the second round. And Emmanuel Sanchez into the hype train that was Taiwan Claxton, submitting him with a triangle choke in the second round. Emmanuel Sanchez, I think, is a dark horse for this tournament. Looked very good. I'm very excited. If they wanted to match these 4 up in just 2 different bouts moving forward in the second round of this division, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I'm very excited about all 4 of these guys: Campos, Borix, Carvalho, or Ian Sanchez. So I'm really interested. The next round, I believe, of this tournament will be at Bellator 228, and the main headline fight of those 4 fights will be the featherweight title bout between Juan Archuleta, the challenger, taking on the champion Patricia Pitbull Ferrara. So this is going to be an exciting tournament. I think this is going to be the best Grand Prix that Bellator's had yet. And I think this got kicked off with a bang, and this event was actually pretty good, other than the obvious, just the lopsided main event that ended in a terrible no contest, and it was just okay, I'm going to bed. But moving on from here, the big news over the weekend that dropped, and I covered it on a news roundup Saturday morning, and then it was literally like within hours, everything I covered on that was kind of a mute subject. It was kind of outdated already, because then they just dropped the news. Nate Diaz will fight Jorge Masvidal as the headlining bout at UFC 244 November 2nd in Madison Square Garden. And, I talked about the welterweight chaos that was going on, about how Ariel Helwani came out and said, Masvidal is I know that the Covington and Usman title bout is far from done. They're having problems with the negotiation, and they might move Masvidal in. And Masvidal came out saying, calling out Usman, and then next thing you know, Masvidal's coming out, hitting up Nate Diaz on Twitter saying, screw these losers or whatever he called them. We need to fight for the baddest mother effer title later on, me and Nate. And then that incited a response from Masvidal's longtime friend and teammate, Colby Covington, who came out signaling at Masvidal saying, I know you're dumb and desperate, George, talking to his friend and teammate. But, what's super necessary is that you win to get title fights, indicating that Masvidal's only on a 2-fight win streak. Covington's on a 7-fight win streak. And basically said that they're bums and, he needs to just sit down and shut up. Basically is the way he was handling it. So there was a lot of this infighting between teammates and confusion about who would fight. And it was kind of got a lot of people nervous because these are two obvious fights that should happen. And I could see the UFC messing it up. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. It doesn't look like Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman is going to be on this card at the moment. But they did make Nate Diaz versus George Masvidal, which I believe that's the people's fight of the year right there. And I'm glad. I hope that they keep this as a headlining 5-round bout because this fight needs to be 5 rounds. And I do not think they need to have a title on the line for this. I don't think they need to put a title fight ahead of this. This is going to be as big of a fight as they can make right now. This is going to be a huge monster fight. They're going to definitely get their money's worth with these two. So I think the UFC did right. I think Madison Square Garden's an awesome venue for these two. I'm happy for both of them. These are two soldiers of the sport who have put their time and work in, their personas, their grit, their toughness, their willingness to always go out there and lay it on the line has paid off for them. And, they've taken their lumps, they've taken their losses, but they've stayed strong. They've come back. They're only better. Their names have never been bigger right now. And one of them is going to prevail to being a monster star after this fight. So, which is sure to be amazing. So, great fight. UFC 244, November 2nd, Madison Square Garden. Nathan Diaz taking on Jorge Masvidal. So, stay tuned to the CRP. This has been a CRP News Roundup. We will keep you covered more going forward.